Good evening, everyone. I just want to thank some DOB staff that are present here. Casimir Vilenchek, the first Deputy Commissioner, he had to leave, but he was here for the first session. Reda Shahada, the Brooklyn Commissioner. Tina Voltaggio, the Deputy Brooklyn Commissioner. Sophia Harrison, the Brooklyn Chief Plan Examiner. Damian Titus, Building Code Specialist at the Development Hub. Marta Victoria, Code and Zoning Specialist, Development Hub. Eric Jostok, Deputy Borough Commissioner of Development Hub. Mang Sung Mercy Sawyer, Director of Code and Zoning Interpretation. Lan Jo Wu, Chief Plan Examiner of Development Hub. And Elizabeth Spearing, Chief Plan Examiner of Manhattan. Thank you. We're going to have the next session on ADUs, and from the Building Department, Mercy Sawyer will be presenting. Mangsoon Mercy Sawyer, AIA NCARB, is the Director of Code and Zoning Interpretation at the New York City Department of Buildings. Mercy leads a team of architects, engineers, and city planners in streamlining the processing and adjudication of code and zoning determination requests, ensuring safe and compliant construction across New York City. She has played a pivotal role in developing the 2022 New York City Building Code, contributing her expertise to special projects, technical memos, building bulletins, and official determinations. Before joining the city, Mercy spent over a decade in the private sector as a project architect, overseeing design and construction projects of various scales. Originally from Hong Kong, she moved to the United States and earned her BA in architecture from UC Berkeley and a Master of Architecture from Columbia University. Welcome, Mercy.
Thank you, Ida, and thanks for having me here. So I'm going to give a brief overview of Local Law 127. Let me see if this works. It does not. So Mark, you would have to move the slides for me. Okay. So Local Law 127 was necessary in order to facilitate the construction of ADUs, ancillary dwelling units, and this is to really dovetail with the City of Yes and all the zoning amendments that had taken place. So next, please, Mark. So Local Law 127, it actually amends two codes. It amends the New York City Building Code, adding a new Appendix U. It also amends two sections in the Fire Code, FC 503 and the 504. So the hot question, when can ADUs be filed at the DOB? And that's 180 days after the law was passed on December 18, 2024. So applicants can start filing on the 16th of June of this year. So an FYI, the local law talks about rulemaking in several places. Rulemaking generally doesn't create new laws. It's really just to provide additional technical clarification to the law itself, and also some procedural or administrative details that applicants need to be aware of. So this rulemaking is currently in progress. Our GC office is working hard. We're working hard, and the publication and the public hearing process will follow the typical rulemaking protocol steps, and it will be posted on the DOB website. And another FYI is that we will be making some updates to DOB Now. ACNY had let us know through all your membership that the current DOB Now is not really geared toward filing of ADUs. So we've taken your notes and we will be bringing it back and reflecting it with our DOB Now IT folks to make the necessary changes so that you guys can file. So next, please, Mark. So the Appendix U overview. So just so you know how the sausage gets made, we actually took Appendix U from the model codes. I believe it's out of the residential code. There was actually an ancillary dwelling unit or similar appendix that's out there. So we took that, and then I don't know if you guys recall, there was the East New York basement pilot program. So we also took some of those requirements from that legislation to incorporate it into the basement section requirements for Appendix U. So Appendix U pretty much breaks down to these sections. There's the general, and then you have your definitions, kind of typical to how this building code is set up. You have the general requirements, which it tells you it applies to all types of ADUs until it doesn't. So it then goes into the 5 different types of ADUs, and at the beginning of each of these sections, it actually tells you what applies out of the general requirements and what doesn't. So it's important to read kind of like the lead-in of these, the 201 through 205, each of the different types. You want to make sure you're actually looking at the correct section for the ADU you're designing and constructing. So next, please, Mark. So this is kind of like a visual of the structure, and like I said before, U103 is the general requirements, and then underneath it you have these 5 different types. So 201 is the 1 family plus ADU. The ADU must be entirely above grade. U202 is basement or cellar ADUs. These have to be in existing buildings. And they can be inside the program area or outside the program area. And what I mean by the inside of the program area, that's the Local Law 126, which is the basement legalization legislation. U203 is 2 family plus ADU, and it specifically talks about it being required to be separate by a firewall. And U204 is detached ADUs. These are standalones. The primary residence could be 1 or 2 family. And then 205, you have the manufactured home ADU. So next, please, Mark. So just some highlights. Again, this is an overview. It's not really a Local Law 127 training. So just some highlights. Just remember, ADUs, you're limited to adding 1. So there's never any scenario where you're adding 2 ADUs. Only 1 ADU is permitted on the same tax lot as a 1 or 2 family dwelling. Appendix U tells you that at the get-go. The primary dwelling must be an R3 occupancy. And then the next biggest question everyone wants to know is the MDL trigger. So a 2-family adding an adjoining ADU using firewall per BCU 203, MDU is not triggered. And so this is actually an interpretation we got from the law department. So it's supported by the law department, and that's how we were able to draft this way, is that 2, you build a firewall plus an adjoining ADU. These are separate buildings, and the section itself actually tells you that they have to operate as separate buildings, so you're not passing through this firewall in any sort of way. And so MDU is not triggered, but you see that I have a little asterisk, and it tells you that in Local Law 126, that is, you have to be an eligible program area legalization participant. Now, that is a whole other thing that you have to read 126 to figure out. You have to already have a legal residence, you have to be inside certain program areas, it's all spelled out. But that actually says you can have a 2-family dwelling plus a basement or cellar ADU. So that, there's an MDL carve out there. So again, unless you're in Local Law 126 legalization, that you're like there in the Local Law 126. So to continue that thought is that, however, if you're 2-family adding an internal ADU or adjoining ADU, but you're not doing this firewall, then now you have 3, right? So you trigger MDL. So that's just how it goes. So if you want to, and with MDL, you have more stringent requirements, so you want to stay away from that, right? So that's kind of like the trick that was done in U203 in order to do that. And then one other clarification before we keep going is that there's the table U103.8. We've received a related question from ACNY about the table, and I think what a lot of you didn't see, and now that looking back during drafting, we did something that made it more complicated for people to understand, but the table actually only applies to ADU types U203, 204, and 205. And it's kind of, this clarification is hidden in footnote 8. So don't hate me, but it would have made the name very long for that table, but that's kind of what we did. So the table applicability is only to types 203, 204, and 205, and these are above grade ADU types or detached. So when you are talking about an internal ADU within the existing volume of your primary dwelling, you shouldn't be looking at this table. So, and we'll get into that later in the questions that were submitted. So, so yeah, table 103.8 does not apply to ADUs complying with 201 and 202. Okay, so a little bit more breakout on each of the types. So 201 specifically, it's only one family plus an ADU. And the text itself says that the ADU has to be entirely above grade plane. So you can't be a basement. Your entire ADU has to be above grade plane. So it can also be adjoining or within the same building as the one family. And sprinklers are not required. There's actually an exception in 201.1 exception. Because I think, as some of you have rightfully asked, like, it's just a two, if two families are not required to sprinkler, why is one family plus an ADU required? So actually there is an exception written for that, but we reserve that attic ADUs still have to be sprinklered for safety reasons. So take a look at the exception in 201.1. Next, Mark. So the second type, U202, that's the basement or cellar ADU. These are for existing one or two family dwellings only, so you cannot construct a new building with this ADU in mind. Existing one family can add one basement or cellar ADU. Existing two families adding a basement or cellar ADU triggers MDL and becomes R2 occupancies. Because again, this is internal, right? So there's no firewall trick you can do in order to get away from MDL. So you flip to R2 in this regard, you trigger MDL. So and the asterisk there is that for legalization folks, you can, and MDL is actually was amended to allow the 2 plus this legalization because of lack of housing policy reasons. But again, you have to be in the legalization to do that. And then 202.3 also talks about the prohibited locations for basement or cellar ADUs. So the Appendix G, special flood hazard areas, you cannot have a basement or cellar ADU. The 10-year rainfall flood risk, these are maps that DEP is currently drafting. These are the inland flood maps. And then there's the coastal flood risk areas. So another thing to remember is that the cellar ADU ceiling height must be at least 2 feet above grade plane. That's a prerequisite. Like if you're trying to create a cellar ADU and your ceiling height is less than that above grade plane, then you cannot create this ADU. So thanks, Mark. Okay. So now we're at the U203 type, and this is the neat trick I told you about, the 2 family plus ADU, but you have to have this firewall. And the law, the Appendix U itself, 203.1, specifically actually add on to the firewall definition, which I clipped below, but the law itself actually says it has to be masonry or concrete. And in this instance, when you create this configuration, the ADU is considered a separate building, so it takes you out of the MDL. Next, please. And then you have 204. This is kind of the granny flat scenario. These are standalone ADUs in the back. The primary dwelling can be 1 or 2 family, and this section covers the garage conversions. And then 205 is the manufactured home ADU. So there is some rulemaking that needs to happen in order to kind of facilitate this. I think we're kind of concentrating all our kind of efforts on the other rule right now for the basement legalization and also the 127 rule, but there's going to be a rule for manufactured home ADUs as well. If you want to understand what the scope of using manufactured home, there's actually an existing TPPN 6 of 88, which says that the department still has the authority to review for site and zoning connections, but then everything inside is kind of per state regulations. So if you're interested, you can take a look, but there's going to be a rule to follow up on this. And the manufactured home can be attached or detached, similar to the other configurations that were described. And so that's kind of like the quick overview before we get into the case studies, and I think Joe would like to make an announcement.
I would just like to take a minute to acknowledge the ACNY committee that prepared the case studies we're about to review. The committee consists of Ida Galea from AIA Brooklyn, Harriet Nikakis from AIA Queens, Michael Sana, Giuseppe Bonomo, James Oliva, and myself from AIA Staten Island. I'd like to thank them for volunteering their time, their effort, and their hard work. Initially, when we began the committee, the goal was to create some case studies that we'd have out there by the time it went into play in June. But when the opportunity for today's seminar came about, everybody kind of kicked it into high gear and we got it done. So I'd like to thank them for their hard work. What we're about to review are a couple of case studies that we prepared. When we were reviewing the local law, there was a half dozen of us on the committee, and I would say every issue we looked at, 3 of us thought it was black and white, and the other 3 thought it was gray. So we felt the need to prepare these case studies. So on them, we have some questions that are specific to that particular building type, some of which were already addressed by Mercy, and then we had some general questions as well. So I just wanted to thank them for their effort and turn it back over to you.
Joe, I think you had wanted to present the case studies before we get to the answers, right? Yeah.
So the first one is a one-family dwelling in a one-family zone. We picked a site that would be compliant. We made it compliant, and we provided the ADU in the basement. A few questions came up, one of which had to do with the roadway. If the building is located on a street 34 foot wide, you normally would not have to sprinkler the building. So the Appendix U, Local Law 27, says you have to sprinkler the ADU. So we just wanted clarification on that one. The second question had to do with the emergency escape and rescue windows or openings. When you have them below grade, besides the door getting into the apartment, you need them in every bedroom. The new local law requires them in every habitable room. So we provided the example with a kitchen, not a kitchenette, where you would need the required light and vent. Would that have to be an EERO? And then the last question had to do with the fire code. Now that the yards are down to 5 feet, and you only needed 1 parking space for the one-family dwelling, you can have 2 5-foot side yards To meet the fire code, you have that 5-foot access on one side. The other side, where you have the entrance to the apartment or to the ADU, you could have a walkway that would step down, get into the main front entrance of that ADU, and then step back up to the rear yard. So we just wanted to confirm if that would comply or not. Okay, here we have a two-family with an apartment in the basement. We felt this would be pretty common to Brooklyn as well. It has a non-complying side yard, but there is an easement between the two buildings so that there is 5 feet to that MFE, the main front entrance, to the ADU. Ida, can you help me out with this? I know you prepared it. They're hard to read.
Hard to read, so I put it up on my phone. Okay. So the questions we had about this is the existing bulk floor area, non-complying front and side yards will not change. Will the proposed ADU increase the degree of non-compliance? The second question we had was the addition of the proposed ADU in the basement of an existing two-family will now exceed the maximum floor area allowable. Will the proposed ADU increase the degree of non-compliance? The third question we had is the proposed ADU within an existing two-family is required to be classified as a Group R2 occupancy. Will accessibility as per Chapter 11 be required? The fourth question we had was, as per the New York State MDL, no frame building shall be converted to a multiple dwelling. The majority of two-family buildings in the New York City area are within a frame building. How would this be addressed?
Okay, and then finally the third one, Mark.
This ADU was for the conversion of an existing garage. The questions we had on this was, as per ZR 23-341B4 III, the size shall be limited to an area not exceeding 1/3 of the rear yard. The required rear yard is 20 feet by 24 foot 6, which is the lot width in this case, which equals 490 square feet. Times that by 1/3, we're left with a maximum of 161 square feet. The existing garage is 361 square feet. No change to the existing bulk. Will the proposed ADU increase the degree of noncompliance? Number 2, as per ZR 23-341B4, where such building is freestanding, it shall not be closer than 5 feet to a rear lot line or side lot line. The existing bulk and non-complying setback from side and rear yards will not change. Will the proposed ADU increase the degree of noncompliance? Number 3, the minimum width required for fire department access path is 5 feet as per Fire Code 504.1.2 and Table U-103.8 of Appendix U. The existing non-compliant side yard is only 3'6", but there is a driveway easement to remain unobstructed of 7 feet between the buildings. Would this be in compliance with the required 5-foot minimum fire department access? So those were the questions we came up with when we put together these case studies. So we were trying to implement the zoning in existing conditions as well as new buildings to see what issues arise when we try to incorporate Local Law 127 within those properties.
Thank you so much, and I know it takes a lot of effort and work and discussion to come up with these case studies, so thank you. So Mark, we can go from here backward too, it's fine, whichever direction. Oh, okay, you're back to the first one, okay. All right, so this is a proposed new building. It's 1 fam plus a basement ADU, right? That's the proposal. Okay, so the first question was that, let's see, it's talking about sprinklers and why are sprinklers required? Because if the fire code doesn't typically require two-family to do that, right? So, Mark, if you can mouse over, thank you. So, pursuant.
Read the question.
Sure. I can kind of see. It's okay.
Okay.
Yeah, but thank you. So, So this is, a proposal is adding a basement ADU, right? So the relevant section is Appendix U 2021, and 2021 actually says that basement ADUs are only permitted in existing 1 or 2 family dwellings. So to create a basement ADU in a proposed new building is not really permitted. But however, if this is redesigned and the ADU is entirely above grade, U201.1 exception provides sprinkler exemption for 1 family plus 1 above grade ADU. So that will be in line with your understanding, is that, hey, if 2 fam doesn't have to be sprinkler, why is 1 family plus 1 ADU required to sprinkler, right? But again, remember, if you're adding an attic ADU, the attic ADU still has to be sprinkler. So does that clarify the first bit? Okay, cool. All right, and then the second one is talking about the emergency escape and rescue openings, right? And Appendix U right now, the specific wording is all habitable rooms have to provide this emergency escape and rescue opening. So it's true, that's what the Appendix U 103.7 requires. It wants a EERO in every habitable room. And that was really a safety issue, especially if it's a below grade dwelling. But for the configuration depicted, which is the kitchen is kind of like one space with the space next with the living room, I think we may consider provision of 1 to be adequate, since they're not separate rooms. I think we can perhaps clarify it in a future bulletin. So that was a good raise, good flag from you all. The third part, it's talking about the 5 feet side yards, and one side is providing the entrance to the below grade ADU, and so please confirm compliance with the fire code. Okay, yeah, so it talks about, it's kind of asking which is the relevant section. So in this configuration, FC 504.1.2 is the applicable section, because that section talks about occupancies with separate entrances. So as long as 5 feet access is provided, then this is in compliance. So 5 feet is provided in this regard to the ADU. So let's just assume this is the existing building, right? Because that was like the baseline that you have to be. If this is the existing building, you're adding this ADU, you have the 5 foot FD access, so this is compliant. Yeah. Okay, so now we have the existing 2-family building. It's proposing a basement ADU, and the premise is that it acknowledges that it will become a R2. I believe that's in the question itself. So the first part was talking about now that the front yard, the existing bulk floor area and non-complying front and side yards will not change. Will the proposed ADU increase the degree of non-compliance? So the zoning section 54-32 has new provisions to allow for new non-compliances for FAR. So it is not considered a new non-compliance in this regard. And then the second part, the addition of the proposed ADU in the basement of an existing 2-family will now exceed the maximum floor area allowable. Will the, oh wait, sorry, I flipped it. The first one is actually there is in Article 5 a new provision for non-compliance, increase of non-compliance. So it's not considered an increase. And then the second one is for FAR, 54-53 Part A. That is for the FAR increases in non-compliance. And then the proposed ADU within an existing two-family is required to be classified as a Group R2 occupancy with accessibility as per Building Code Chapter 11 be required. So Building Code Chapter 11 says that when you change occupancy, Chapter 11 will be triggered. However, we understand this is a tough spot. We know that there's a housing crisis, and this is sorely, this is the policy that the city wants. So we are actively looking into it. But when there's a change of occupancy, Chapter 11 says, Chapter 11 is triggered, accessibility is triggered. But again, I am not saying definitively here. So we're going to actively look into the interpretation. Part 4, as per New York State multiple dwelling law, no frame building shall be converted to a multiple dwelling. The majority of two-family buildings in New York City are within a frame building. How would this be addressed? So Appendix U, Section 203.6 allows framed buildings to build an attached ADU separated by a firewall. So I guess our answer here is that you would have to look into the different configurations to see what might work for you. But if you want to do an internal one, yeah, you will trigger. But I think with Appendix U, there's different flavors of ADU that one might consider to achieve the addition of an ADU. But if you're in an internal volume, then you're kind of triggering that. So this is the existing garage in the back, and I believe the site drawing is showing it coincide with the lot lines, right? Yeah, okay. Where it is rear and side, right? Exactly, it's in the corner there. So in number 1, it's basically, it's pointing out that 23-34B4 part something, the size is limited to an area not exceeding 1/3 of the rear yard, and the required rear yard is a certain size, so it's kind of trying to demonstrate that this will be over that coverage. So will the proposed ADU conversion from the existing garage be an increase in the degree of noncompliance? So we think that with ZR 54-53 Part A, which is the specific allowable increase in noncompliance in floor area ratio, we believe that this is okay. So this is not getting into any danger zone with the sections that you're talking about there in question 1. And then with 23, the second part of the question, it's talking about the 5-foot setback from the rear lot line requirement and the side lot line in Article 2, Chapter 3. So it's saying that, hey, this existing bulk is not in achieving that. So is it an increase in the degree of noncompliance? So we think 54, so in the ZR 54-53 Part B, there's the specific allowable increase in noncompliance and required open space and yards. So we think this is okay. So you're allowed to convert the garage. I think that was the intent, like that existing garages will be able to be converted. Then Part 3, minimum width required for fire department access paths. So FC 504.1.2 and Table U 103.8 of Appendix U, it talks about the 5 feet fire department access, right? So the specific site condition right now, it's actually pretty narrow. I think it was a 3.5. Right, so yeah, so it's actually, right now the driveway is 7 feet, but it's chopped in half. One belongs to one side, one lot, the other belongs to the other lot. There's a driveway easement. So the question is this in compliance with the 5-foot requirement? So the 5-foot fire department access requirement actually lives in multiple places. It lives in ZR 1210, and within the definition for ADU, it specifically says backyard ADUs shall be accessible directly from a side yard or open area along a side lot line with a minimum width of 5 feet, which requires the 5 feet to be provided within the zoning lot. Appendix U, the table talks about the 5 feet requirement as well, and then same with the fire code. So while the department, I know we generally accept easement agreements when there are shared driveways with the 5 feet access pursuant to Appendix U, because the 5 feet requirement also lives in the ZR, and we can't vary the ZR. So that's kind of the problem we'll run into. That I think department practice is that we generally honor this easement agreements, meaning for Appendix U, you're okay, but because the 5 feet also lives in the zoning resolution and Department of Buildings have no power to vary from the zoning resolution. So.
Hello? Okay. I just wanted to make a point that the garage scenario, as well as the two-family adding an ADU in the basement scenario, is the same property, and it's an actual real property. That property would not be able to do a basement ADU, nor the garage ADU, because it doesn't have the 5-foot access. So this property couldn't do an ADU based on, even though zoning allows it, because of the restrictions, it wouldn't be acceptable in this particular property. I just wanted to make that point, that's all.
Okay, so thanks to ACNY, the committee prepared additional questions that are standalone. So the first one, in Appendix U 101.2.4, ADUs and cellars must have a clear ceiling height that is at least 2 feet above the grade plane. Does this apply to existing structures only? Is it the intent to permit ADUs and cellars of proposed 1- and 2-family dwellings as well? As I said earlier, Appendix U 202.1 is specifically for existing buildings only. So you cannot create this in a proposed new construction. But note also that if the building is not in the legalization program eligible for Local Law 126, then you're limited to 1 family plus 1 ADU only, either in the basement or cellar. So. Appendix U 101.5, Department Rules. Right, so the question was how is this going to happen and how does this affect the current Appendix U document? So as I said earlier, we're actively drafting the rule right now. It will follow their strict rules to how rules are reviewed for public comment, when is it posted, etc. So the rule is meant to complement and supplement Appendix U with clarifications and additional technical details. It's not supposed to be changing the law in any way. Appendix U 103.6, ADUs shall be provided with a fire protection system in accordance with Chapter 9. In instances where site conditions would permit the development of a detached 2-family residence without a sprinkler, why would a 1-family residence with an ADU require sprinklers in the ADU? So the general requirements tells you always sprinkler, right? But then when you get to section 201.1 exception, so 201 is for above grade ADU. So your ADU has to be completely above grade and is being added to a 1-family. There is an exception to allow you to not have sprinklers unless you're doing the ADU in your attic. So I think this is a good clarification, because I think that's kind of like the feeling is that, hey, if two fam doesn't have to be sprinklered, why is one family plus one ADU have to be sprinklered? So again, if you're adding the ADU that's completely above grade to one family, there is a sprinkler exception, except for when you're adding this ADU in the attic. So this is about the emergency escape and rescue openings. So the question is pointing out that in BC 1030, it says that only sleeping rooms need to have the emergency escape and rescue openings. Then why is Appendix U more stringent? Basement ADUs are only allowed in existing buildings, and requiring EROs for every habitable room is really to ensure safety. So even when living rooms are illegally turned into sleeping spaces, there's a means of escape for the folks. So it was kind of like a FD required item that they wanted. So that's why it was drafted that way. So this is the funky footnote A I was telling you about earlier, the table U103.8. So the intent of BCU 103.8 is to allow ADUs of no more than 2 stories to be able to set back from the curb and comply with the FD fire department access requirements, to not to have to provide frontage space when you have an ADU in the back of your house. The table is really only applicable to ADUs not internal to the primary dwelling. So if you are planning on a one family with an ADU internal to you, or I guess in this scenario, it's talking about 2-story ADU within a 3-story building, you really should not be looking at that table, because it won't make much sense, because it was not intended to cover you. It was supposed to cover ADU types in U203, 204, and 205. So if you're internal, then you're not in that table. So check out footnote A for the table, and that will become clear. Yeah, so again, if you're doing an internal ADU, so in this question, it's talk about an attic ADU, the table doesn't apply to you. So don't look at the table. Attic ADUs shall comply with U201, and table 103.8 is not applicable for ADU types built as U201. So see footnote A. Again, the intent of the table is to ensure provision of that 5-foot fire department access path to ADUs in the back of the primary dwelling. So, scope, ADU located entirely above grade, right. So does this mean that the floor level of the ADU must be located above the grade plane, which is the first floor, or does it include a basement, which is defined as a story above the grade plane in the building code? So the language in U201, that particular line actually says an ADU located entirely above the grade plane. So basements cannot be considered, the entire volume of it cannot be considered an ADU located entirely above the grade plane. So BC 201 is not the applicable section to apply. This question was about, because U201.4, we kind of went to the trouble of telling you what to do if you want to do a combustible exterior stair. So the question was, what about a non-combustible exterior stair? What should you do? So non-combustible exterior stair, you should follow BC Chapter 10 and Table 601, and that should be the correct way to go. ADU located in the basement or cellar of an existing 1 or 2 family dwelling. The above section indicates a basement or cellar within an existing building. Does section U202 only apply to existing 1 or 2 family residences or to new buildings? So it only applies to existing 1 or 2 family dwellings only. The section 202.5 spells that out clearly. So U202 ADU in a basement or cellar, the multiple dwelling law does not allow the conversion of a 1 or 2 family to a multiple dwelling, occupancy R2 in a frame building. Majority of existing 1 and 2 family dwellings are built of frame construction, and this regulation would decrease the ability for a large amount of existing housing stock to convert from a 2 to a multiple dwelling. So if you are outside of the program area in a frame building, 1 family plus ADU is allowed, is permitted per BCU 202.4. You're really stuck. You cannot really go from 2 to more. But if you are inside the program area, U 101.1.1 allows 2 family plus ADUs in a frame building. So again, but that's local law 126. Emergency escape and rescue openings. Right, so this is saying BC 1030 talks about only sleeping rooms are required to have this, but Appendix U says you have to have it in every habitable room, so how should this be applied? So per BCU 101.1, ADUs shall comply with the entirety of the New York City construction codes if Appendix U does not specifically address. But if Appendix U specifically addressed, then Appendix U governs. So I think the more specific applies. I mean, clearly if you're doing an ADU, you should be following Appendix U. So this is 203, that is ADU separated by a firewall from a 2-family primary dwelling. A firewall, the question is, the firewall is a rated wall that must extend continuously from the foundation to or through the roof. Does this section apply specifically to ADUs attached to 2-family dwellings? Is this the intent? Can ADUs in the basement of a Type 5B be separated from a 2-family residence by a fire division? So the intent for 203, where the title is, ADU separated by firewall from a 2-family primary dwelling, it's really intent to only address 2-family dwellings with an attached ADU. A fire division would not meet the definition of firewall as required by BC U203. So the scenario described at the end of the question is not really possible. So this is the Fire Code 504.1.2. It was amended by Local Law 127. So it says, what is meant by an open accessory parking area not less than 5 feet in width shall be sufficient to constitute unobstructed access to a rear yard, regardless of parked vehicles in such parking area. Then it posits that the minimum parking area width needs to be at least 8, so that doesn't mean you need to do 8 plus 5 for unobstructed access. If so, that would mean the driveway has to be at least not less than 13 in order to meet this access to the ADU. So per the Appendix U and also the Fire Code Amendment, as long as you have 5 feet provided for FD access, it is considered compliant. 13 feet is not needed. It's not needed. So the language quoted up there is actually just fire code language that's been carried over and haven't been revised by the local law. So the existing language acknowledges that there could be parked vehicles and it doesn't affect compliance. Thank you, ACNY, for sending over the DOB now questions as well. You guys have marked up what you think will be necessary in order to file for an ADU in DOB now. I don't have answers for what is being done, but I will take your suggestions and concerns back to the IT crew. So,
Just one question. I think it's more of a comment, but you indicated that Appendix U is for existing buildings, right?
The section for basement and cellars is for existing
see.
buildings. Yeah.
But the zoning, okay, I just want to make sure. So for the zoning resolution allows ADUs in new construction. I can build 100 new row houses with ADUs
Yes,
built into them, and I just want to make sure I understand that. That's
Yeah,
okay.
only U20, I think it's 203 for basement and cellars.
But if
In
I
Appendix
comply
U.
with the building code,
You can comply with building code and do a basement dwelling anytime, but
I don't have to comply with Appendix U if I comply with the building code for as a new unit, right?
sure, yeah.
Okay, I just want to make sure.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Do I alternate? Oh,
In terms of conversion of a cellar or basement, the requirement was that the ceiling of the cellar has to be 2 feet above grade. How does that work with the required emergency escape requirements? Because you can't get a window in that space. Are you allowed to carve out a portion of the rear yard to create some sort of a well to get out of there?
So yes, the emergency escape rescue openings and the associated window well. The window well is envisioned to be on the exterior, right? So it'll be kind of like an areaway almost on the exterior to the emergency rescue opening. So yes, some excavation will be required. So in some sense, if the window wells cannot be accommodated, then it kind of disqualifies the site from really to consider a below-grade ADU if you cannot provide these rescue openings and window wells to the outside. Yeah. And it depends on how far below grade you are, the size of the window well. So the local law itself tells you exactly how to calculate that.
Can I get some clarification on the firewalls and the sprinklers? First, on the firewalls, if we have a typical semi-attached row building that's a two-family with masonry exterior walls, and it has 2 dwelling units on the second and third level, and the first level is considered a recreation space. If we convert that to an accessible dwelling unit, would we have to either fire rate the ceiling, or would we have to sprinkler that space, or do we have to sprinkler the whole building to create an accessible dwelling unit in a building of that type?
So you're talking about a internal to the existing two-family, right?
Existing two-family,
Okay.
yes, with a
So-
garage in the front, and they have a recreation space in the back of the garage, open to the backyard, above grade, totally above grade.
Right. So the neat trick I was explaining about the whole firewall scenario is that you need to actually have a vertical firewall to separate you from the ADU. So the internal configuration where you're kind of envisioning a horizontal, some sort of separation would not comply with what a firewall would be. So the firewall has to be vertical to your existing configuration, and the ADU is beyond that.
Okay, I don't know how that would work in most cellars or basements or it doesn't work, it's impossible. But you have to have some sort of horizontal separation. If it was in a basement, how would you're not going to separate all 3 floors. It doesn't make sense. Even garages have ceilings, then they have to be fire rated.
Right. So you can't do it into, yeah.
You can't do it. Okay, so if you have an attic space that has to be sprinklered, two parts, can it be taken off the domestic water, and does the whole building have to be sprinklered, or just the attic accessible dwelling unit?
I believe it's just the attic.
Can
So
it be-
it's a 1 plus the attic ADU.
Right, correct.
Yeah.
So could it be taken off the domestic water supply if it was below the number of heads that are allowed in that case.
I believe so, yes. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, hello. So we had this discussion in the Queens Industry DOB meeting regarding the DEP and the sewer connection. They wanted to know how the DEP is going to handle it, whether it's going to have the a detached ADU connect directly to the city sewer or connect to the main building.
Right, so we understand that it's a very costly thing to have a brand-new connection all the way to the street. So we're going to be talking to City Hall, and City Hall will connect with DEP on how to do this, but I think at least during interagency discussions, the thought is that it can connect back to the house, but of course, like, you have to consider the elevation, the inverts, and et cetera. But the thought then was that even if you need a ejector pump or something, it's doable. But yes, a separate connection to the street main will be very expensive. So I will definitely take that back to the folks we've been dealing with at City Hall, and they can connect with DEP to reflect that this is the industry concern.
Okay, and then one more question regarding the energy code, I guess, let's say for a detached garage. I know there's provisions for existing buildings, to insulate a different way. Would that be the same, I guess, for if you're converting a garage into an ADU?
I'm not 100% sure, but I understand that the square footage might be so low that there might be some exemptions, but can I get back to you on that?
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I would like to just expand on James's question about in new buildings. So on the new buildings, obviously, Appendix U is not applicable. That's only for existing buildings. So if I want to put an ADU in a brand-new building, I would just conform to the current building code, which would not have any of these provisions that are provided in Appendix U for existing buildings. Am I correct?
I want to clarify that the whole requirement to be existing building only applies when you're trying to do a basement or cellar ADU. So is that what you have in mind?
Well, for instance, if I have, as we had depicted here, which you said, this whole concept of Appendix U is based upon existing buildings. But if we want to create...
No. Appendix U, you can create new ADUs, brand new ADUs. It's just that for basement and cellars, it was kind of limited to existing buildings. So if you want to build, for example, I want to build a one-family plus an internal ADU, yes, you can do that. If you want to do a two-family plus a firewall plus an ADU adjoining in the back with no connection between that firewall, you can do that. You can do a brand-new ADU in the rear of the main building. The main primary dwelling could be one family or two family. You can do that as well. So there's a menu of options for new.
Well, it's a little conflicting because in a one-family, if I go to a two-family residence, even though I'm in a one-family zone, that zoning, that has nothing to do with code. So if I'm building a two-family residence by code, and I comply with the current building code for a two-family residence, and it's new, not in an existing building, are the rules that are indicated in Appendix U applicable to that new unit?
So if you are building a brand-new two-family that you want to add an ADU, you can pick U203, which requires you to put up a firewall.
No, just a one-family and one ADU equal to a two-family for building code.
Yeah,
So-
you can use, that would be 201. That's the entirely above grade U201.
No,
Right.
I understand that, but if I'm building conventionally a two-family, I can put it in a basement. I'm lacking the clarity because all the conversations we had today was that this applies to existing buildings only. And I'm trying to get, is there going to be any release of further clarification, whether it's Appendix U, Section 2, 3, or whatever, that will clarify it for new buildings? Because there's a lot of questions regarding that to meet what's already been granted or approved in the zoning.
again, you can build a new ADU. Appendix U doesn't prohibit you from doing that. So if you want to do a one-family plus an ADU, you can do that, like brand new. If you want to do a brand new two-family plus ADU, you can, but you have to follow U203, which talks about the firewall requirement. You can also do it so that the new ADU in your brand new proposed two-family is detached in the back. That is also possible. So these are the new proposed projects that you can, those are the routes you can pick.
Okay, thank you.
For all the different types of ADUs, whether it be attached or within the building, aside from the building, new, existing, does it always have to comply to FAR regs, or is it ever excluded?
It always counts, but there are instances where we've created special allowances. If you're already at your maximum FAR, that you could convert a garage or something like that, and you can exceed your permitted FAR to basically convert that garage.
Got it.
So there's special allowances in 54, 53 that Mercy was citing
Okay.
up on the table.
So for a new one-family with a ADU, wherever it is inside the building, it counts?
Yeah,
Got
that's
it.
right. And that's one of the reasons we sort of bumped up the underlying
Okay.
FARs,
Got
just
it.
to account for that.
Sure,
Yeah.
cool, thank you.
Hi, will the administrative code also be changed and updated to include the utilization of Appendix U and still use prior code construction? Or do we have to, are we limited to only the 2022 building code when we're doing this?
I don't think we envision the use of the prior codes for ADUs, so.
So it's a requirement to use for existing buildings, the 2022 building code?
So if you have an existing building and you are, but adding an ADU, right? Can I get back to you?
Of course. I'm ready now.
I want to say, like, there's always the option to use prior codes for certain things, right? There's the path we can always go back in time, but before I step on my own foot, I should get back to you.
No, that's fine, and I thank you for that. But I think they would have to amend the administrative code to allow us to use Appendix U and prior code, if that is the intent to use the prior code. All right, thank you.
Yeah, I think in internal discussions, we're like, well, you can, but again, I don't want to.
No.
Yeah.
And if we filed a new building years ago, and the CBO is going to be issued after June 6th, whatever that deadline is, when we can start filing ADUs, that's a new building. Once a CBO is issued, when can we put an ADU in the cellar? We can't file it as of right. Can we, after the CBO is issued, can we put an ADU in?
So you will get your CO before the date, correct?
No, get the
No.
if we are not permitted to have cellar or basement apartments in new construction.
Right.
We're going to file a new CBO, so we can't even amend it now to add an ADU in it now. Fine, we'll get the CBO. Once a CBO is issued, it's an existing building. Is there some sort of cutoff or a time constraint on when the CBOs are important? What's the definition of existing building is really my question.
Well, when you have in CO, or, yeah.
So as soon as, if I filed a one-family house in a one-family district, get the CBO, the next day we can file for an ADU.
I believe the date of when we will accept the filing would be important. So we're starting to accept the filing on the 16th.
No, even after that date.
Even
Even in the
after
future. When
Right.
is there a possibility of doing, the new building today is an existing building as soon as the CBO is issued, even after the filing date? Can we
Yeah.
then add an ADU in the cellar?
So the intent is really not to create more of these below grade.
That's, I'm just.
Yeah, so if that's
When do we-
if
how do
that
we
is
want
the
it?
intent, then the, but yeah, we struggle with what is existing. But again, the intent, just, get back to basics, right? The intent was actually not to create more subgrade dwellings. That was why the word existing was added to that section, is that we don't really want people to keep creating more of these, right? Like if you're building brand new, you should build it so that people are not, in limited, light and air scenarios. So, so from that regard, there should be a cutoff. And now the cutoff, the law was passed December last year. Effective is June 16. So, I'll get back to you, but I would say that there is a cutoff because the whole intent, again, is not to create more and more below-grade dwellings.
I have a question about the ADU on this diagram. If we created an ADU as a horizontal enlargement to the existing semi-detached one-family, one-story in the back between the garage and the rear wall of the building, but the access to that unit, to the ADU, is going to be through the cellar of the existing building, through the cellar or through the basement. So we're not going to rely on that non-compliant side yard less than 5 feet for the access of fire department access. Will that be allowed?
So you're describing sorry.
The extension is going to be a horizontal extension beyond the rear wall of the existing building.
So you're adding behind
the building.
This, because we just talked about you don't have the 5, right? Okay, so you're saying what if I
But
create...
the access to it is going to be through the front wall area where with the steps going down through the front wall of the building.
And the existing is one family?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes. Yeah.
one family, and then you are going to go through the front,
To our
go down,
enclosure, right.
and then go to the back, and the back is just adjoining,
I'm not going to go to I'm under the ADU, I'm going to have the entrance stair going up.
When you're...
In the cellar of the basement, yes.
Oh, okay, all right. You want to continue?
It's still a zoning problem, unfortunately. So definitionally, both the detached and attached to the existing building are considered backyard accessory dwelling or ancillary dwelling units, and both of them require the 5-foot access through the side yard.
So it's a zoning requirement.
It's a zoning requirement. It was added by the city council. So it was added sort of late in the game, but it was adopted, so it's in the rules.
Hi.
They were successful in a way, because it was political in that it was definitely trying to limit the applicability of the backyard ADUs in certain areas. So that was the intent. Just to be real. Yeah.
Hi, thank you very much for this presentation. We really appreciate it. I have one of my questions were regarding the site connection, which you said that is being discussed. So thank you very much for that. Being that DOB Now Build is getting updated to accept these filings that are coming in after June 16. Is there a specific unit that is going to be reviewing these applications, or is it going straight through the normal channels? And is there a possibility of expediting these type of units, not self-certified, but just the review time of it? And the last question, quickly, is will we be able to get these slides somewhere, like download them or something? Beautiful, beautiful.
So there have been, I thought I knew the answer, but then a couple days ago, it seems like the answer changed. So I think I would need to get back to this gentleman on which unit is reviewing, whether is it all in all boroughs or is it central? I don't know.
Sure.
And then the pro-cert question, I will also get back to you. I think
Great.
it's
Thank
more
you so much.
prudent that I do that.
Thank you.
Yes, I have another question. Regarding required dimensions for habitable spaces, in the new code, you need to have 8-foot ceiling heights. And this is more for the attic and the cellars. Obviously, existing buildings, for the most part, don't have that ceiling height. I know in the 1968 and prior to 1968 code, they have some provisions for the cellar to be 7 feet. Is that going to affect an ADU? Is there any exceptions for a ceiling height that's less than the required?
Did you say 8?
It's 8 feet, right?
Okay, so I think Appendix U has less than 8.
Oh, it does, okay.
Yeah,
And-
I believe it's 7.
Okay, and then the other question is real quick regarding the access to attic ADU. Is there any provisions for having exterior stairs, or do they have to be internal stairs?
I believe that exterior stair is allowed, but can I get back to you?
Yeah, no problem. I'll email.
I have two questions. One is, are you guys requiring us to file an Alt-1 application for these ADUs? So if I had a one family and I wanted to add an ADU, would I be required to file it as an Alt-CO application, or would it be an Alt-2 application?
So since it's a 1+, I think you would have to amend the CO. So yes, it will be a Alt-1 application.
Okay.
Yeah.
And since this is a follow-up question from the gentleman before, typically there is a construction cost associated with which code we can file it under, whether it be a 1968 code or it has to be the 2022 code. And when we push it to the 2022 code, although the Appendix U, you said that you may not need to file the sprinkler system because it's a 1+ ADU, but if we are triggered to the 2022 code because of the cost of construction, now typically it's more than 30%, then you have to push it to 2022 code, which then would require you to do a sprinkler system. Which one would trump?
I think the exception, since it's more specific, would trump, but I can double check on that.
Okay.
Yeah, please send, if you can send it to the email address, that would be great.
Hi, good evening. In Queens, we have some unique situations where we have a large zoning lot with currently 15 two-families, each with its own bin number, but it's one tax lot, one zoning lot, with detached brick garages in the rear. And it happens to be a corner lot. Can those brick garages then be all converted to ADUs attached to each of the existing 15 two-families that are on the zoning lot? And are we looking at getting, as you just said, 15 new CLOs for each of the two families to show the ADU?
Are the primary dwellings in the front attached?
Yes, they're like a garden apartment.
And
15
then-
attached two-family buildings with firewalls
And then
between them.
how is the back access?
Well, it's a corner lot, so there's no driveway from the front. It's all walk-in gardens type units, rentals, and you have a side curb cut that leads to the 15 garages detached. And it's a huge lot, so I don't think FAR is a problem with the increased FAR. But we need to file 15 Alt-1s, right? One for each bin number on the one zoning lot?
Yeah, so Appendix U says that when you have an attached building, you're kind of prohibited from creating ADUs in the rear. But your scenario has came up multiple times in internal discussions because you do have alternate access, as you
Right.
mentioned.
And
I think
FDNY has access as well.
right, and Appendix U, when it was drafted, I mean, the thought was that, well, you can't get your 5 feet if you're attached, right? But if you're telling us that there is a means elsewhere, then I think we will study it. So if you can send us your scenario, because I think it's came up in internal discussions too.
Right, 'cause
But I think it'll be good to
we have
really
several
think on it.
of these.
Yeah. So if you can send us the site plan, that would be great.
Thank you.
Hi. So I have a couple of questions. First is with the light well question that came up a little while ago for a seller. So I'm currently under construction for a cellar, a townhouse that has a cellar in Queens, and we put in light wells, and during the plan examination, we could not find a section of the code to cite like a legal light well that would function as a form of egress. So I just wanted to flag, because somebody asked the question before, if maybe we just missed it and the plan examiner missed it, but if you could add a section that would define what the light well would be, that would be acceptable as a form of egress.
So the emergency escape rescue opening, it references back to BC section 1030, and that talks about the required window well size and so on.
Okay. Maybe, I don't know what else, there was like a separate issue, so maybe I'm wrong, and that would be great. I mean, but I guess similar to the other gentleman's question about at what point are we no longer able to legalize a condition? Right now, it's filed as a rec room, but clearly it could be an ADU. We won't have a C of O. I mean, I guess if the C of O remains in place as is, it's an existing condition, right? We're just doing an alt-2 renovation, is that?
So you have an existing
The building
structure?
exists.
Oh, the
Yeah.
building exists, and you have a CFO?
Yeah.
Okay.
So then it's probably.
And that is, if you have a CFO, then you are existing.
Fantastic. Okay, next question.
And you are one family right now?
One family,
Okay,
yeah.
yeah.
And then just a question with the easement and the side yard. So if you had a condition where, say, you had a side yard that provided access but didn't have the 5 feet, but then you entered into an easement agreement with the neighbor, I'm thinking of a situation where the zoning requires 8 feet between buildings. So if your neighbor who by zoning cannot build into that easement zone, could you build an ADU and use that easement access for FDNY access, and the unit would be accessible through the property in a non-compliant yard?
So on your own lot, though, you have less than 5?
Yes, 4 feet, which was the original zoning.
Okay. So I think when I went through the question earlier, I explained that, so DOB can only vary our own code or provide variance to our own code. So the 5 feet exists in many places, the 5 feet fire department requirement. And it also is in the zoning resolution, so because it's in the zoning resolution, that's the part we can't, we have no power to vary.
Right, but when you said that you would accept an easement agreement.
Well, so it's only acceptable based on the fact that it will comply with the building code section, the Appendix U requirement, and the fire code requirement, but because, like I said, the 5 feet requirement lives in 3 places, and so DOB only has control over 2 of them, and the zoning resolution portion, we have no power to vary, so it repeats itself, the 5 feet.
But I guess what I'm saying is then in what scenario would the easement be acceptable?
What's that?
In what scenario would the easement be acceptable?
In order to comply with zoning, no, it won't be acceptable.
Oh, so then it
Yeah.
doesn't work?
Yeah.
Okay, okay, noted. Thank you. Thank you.
Good evening. Couple of clarifications. So my understanding is if you do an ADU, you're always going to have to file an Alt-1 or an Alt-CO, change the C of O. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So in the case of, another question, in the case of fire separations, when you add an addition onto the back of a building, you'll have to have a masonry or concrete separation. What happens on the horizontal fire divisions between an ADU and the basement and the first floor?
I believe U202, so it's only for existing structures, but I think it requires 1 hour between the basement or cellar dwelling and the primary dwelling above.
So when you do an addition, it would be more than 1 hour onto the back?
You mean the firewall?
The firewall.
I think the firewall will be required to be.
That's what I'm not really understanding is if you've got a firewall or a fire separation, but a horizontal fire separation that's 1 hour, but a concrete or masonry separation vertical is usually 2 hours or 3 hours. Why aren't they the same?
So the whole neat trick, again, I'm referring it to the neat trick about the two-family plus the adjoining ADU, it's really only possible because we kind of said, hey, if we put up a firewall, then you're essentially a separate building. So don't look at this as a three-family. You're just two with a firewall and then another one, right? So that is why the whole firewall trick was pulled. But the separate one family with the basement or cellar below grade ADU is only for existing, and the requirement there is only 1 hour. So, and that is the general requirement when you have separate occupancies, separate units, like dwelling units. So it's more stringent when we say, hey, you're a separate building. Like it's more.
I guess I'm talking about an addition to an existing building, and let's say you have the fire egress driveway of some kind to the back area, but you've got a separate an ADU which has been attached to the back of the building. Are you saying that that's impossible, or that it's considered now a two-family or three-family if you put up that concrete firewall?
So if you follow U203, it allows you to have a two-family plus a firewall plus an ADU.
Right.
And you're required to have the 5-foot fire department access.
Right, so that's why I'm kind of a little confused, because it's still considered 1 hour, fire construction class for frame buildings. So if you got a frame building, you want to put an addition on, you got to put up a concrete wall. Still seems a little contradictory to me. But last question, if I could, I understand what you're saying. Will the Department of Finance come down and reassess the building and make it into a three-family, or how is that all going to work?
I believe that this came up at some point in the interagency discussions, but I think Ida is saying 1 to 3 is still in the same tax bracket. It's kind of outside of our wheelhouse, the Department of Finance portion.
But it's a pretty good assurance that they're going to come and reassess the structure and add taxes, right?
There's extra, right. Yeah.
Thank you.
Hi. I have a question and sort of a question clarification. I'm more clear on new construction, but if I have an existing permitted obstruction in an existing lot where the main house is a one family, and I have a garage that is currently active, they use it, and I want to present two cases. In one case, the garage is non-compliant in terms of the distance to the lot line. I have enough FAR to build something. Could I build it on top of the garage? That's one case. And the other case, well, it's better because in the other case I am far enough from the lot line. But could I add square footage on a permitted obstruction for an ADU?
Okay. So the first scenario where you're adding on top, that is allowed?
Yeah.
Yes, you can do that.
Thank you.
And then the second
The second scenario is dumb.
make it
It's
bigger?
better because it's the same garage, but I'm not sure whether the garage, I can't remember if it has a required distance to the lot line, so that was it. So if it's non-compliant right now.
So remember, you can only add on top if you're still parking underneath, so you don't result in a two-story.
Yes, absolutely. And then the other question is, are there any discussions about short-term versus long-term rentals for these ADUs? Are there going to be restrictions, or has this come up in discussion before? And thank you.
These are not supposed to be short-term occupancies, so people should be living there for longer term than, 30 days.
Hi, how are you? This is a question regarding the program area, you said. So you said if you have a two-family frame outside of the program area, you cannot do anything with the cellar or basement as far as ADUs, correct? So, okay, specifically to Queens, I think there's only one program area in Queens. I think it's District 2, which is like Long Island City. So that means that for pretty much the entirety of Queens, if you have a two-family frame, you can't do anything with the cellar and basements, correct? Okay. And this is because of multiple dwelling law? Because if you're changing to R2, you can't do anything with a multiple dwelling?
I'm looking for clarification on the allowable square footage of the detached ADU. And Ada's example kind of alluded to a little bit. She said that it was 1/3 of the required rear yard, and she ended up with 167 square feet or something like that. Is that the requirement? 1/3 of the required rear yard?
The allowable is actually 800 square feet.
That's the maximum allowable.
For the ADU, right. And so the existing, because the garage is existing, I think zoning allows existing non-compliance to happen. So even though there was the calculation and that it seems to be covering more than it should, it's okay. If you're converting this existing.
All right, but if I'm starting from scratch.
Starting from scratch, okay.
Do I have to comply with that 1/3 of the required rear yard? Or am I allowed to go up to the 800 square feet if I have the available space?
Yeah, it's both. Like if you had a very large lot and you had, 1/3 would be, 100 feet or something like that, then the 800 feet would be binding you.
Right.
It's both of them are working in tandem. If you had a smaller lot, you still are restricted to the 1/3, and it might result in a size that's smaller than 800 square feet.
I see.
And that could be binding you and be more restrictive.
So
and you could do the ADU in another location.
Say it again, please.
You could put the ADU in another location if the rear yard was too restrictive for you. It's only in the rear yard that restriction applies. The 1/3.
I see. So if I put it in the rear yard, it has to be 1/3 of the
That's
required
right.
rear yard.
But if you put it in the attic, you're not subject to that.
Well, what if I put it someplace else in the rear yard? Yeah, see, what I'm trying to determine is the allowable square footage of an ADU that, if it's in the rear yard, which I realize is a permitted obstruction, it's required to be the 1/3.
Yep.
But if I put it someplace else in the rear yard, is it still required to be the 1/3 of the required rear yard? Or do I get to make it as big as I can, given the other parameters? The 5 foot from the property lines, the 10 foot from adjacent buildings, things of that sort.
So the thing that the zoning is allowing, like if in a required rear yard, you needed permitted obstruction relief to have the thing in that area. If you're not in a required rear yard, you can do anything. Right, thank you. There's nothing that it can be in the required rear yard up to 1/3 of that required rear yard.
No, I can't hear him. Yeah.
So it feels like there's a drawing that's needed, and maybe we could do it to and share it.
Right, because
But like I think the idea is like if you're in the required rear yard, you can cover 1/3 of it. If you're not in the required rear yard, you're not in the side yard, you're just in the space where the big building can go. You have the envelope of the big building. Like you can do, you're not limited to those same restrictions. So part of your ADU may be in the required rear yard up to 1/3. Part of it may go further into the, whatever you call the space that's not a yard on a lot.
The backyard.
Well, yeah, like the non-required rear yard.
I see. Okay, so up to the 800 square foot.
Yeah, you're still, right, like there are going to be situations where people have the space to go more than like that little like 100-something square feet.
Okay.
You're then going to be limited by that 800. That is the final limit.
I see. So if I happen to have a particularly large
Yeah.
garage, I would still be, even though I'm converting, I'd still be limited to the 800 total.
That's like right, you're in that district, that sounds right. Yeah.
I see. Okay. Great.
I got a couple of clarifications. First, 1 ADU per tax lot or zoning lot?
The zoning says one per residence. One per single or one per single or two-family residence. So in the from the zoning perspective, if you have a zoning lot with multiple single or two-family residences, technically they each could get an ADU, but that's just the zoning trying to be zoning. It doesn't. It's just trying to like align with how the rest of the zoning works.
And Appendix U kind of mirrored
Yeah.
that language too. We actually says is limited to the one or two family dwelling.
Right. And also, a corner lot doesn't have any rear yards. There's no, how much of the side yard are you allowed to occupy?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you have an existing structure in the side yard, right, like you have garages that could be there, you could use the non-compliance provisions to do that. Typically, though, like you're required to have a side yard for other structures, if you're building something, you have the 5-foot rule typically. You have the side yard permitted obstructions, and I think they'd still apply.
Okay. And the other one went out of my head.
Hi, I'm trying to recall the special flood hazard area slide that you had shown. I know for new buildings, I don't think it really matters. Oh, sorry, it doesn't really matter. But in existing buildings, I think it clearly said that we're not to have anything below in the basement and the cellar. Is there any condition we can have an ADU above the design flood elevation?
Above?
Yes, sir.
In the floodplain?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I think the slide only said in the floodplains, you're not allowed subgrade ADUs.
What about the garages, or that was one? Because that would be at grade now, that would not be. Was that also permitted as well, just the basements and cellar?
Oh.
And flood
I
hazard?
think, yeah.
On top, no doubt.
Yeah.
So, look, I thought I'm going from memory. Sorry.
Yeah.
But, no, what I'm saying is, somewhere I thought it said in the special flood hazard area or the coastal risk.
Coastal risk is like a very, very small niche subset.
Right.
There's like 4 little areas of this.
That's me.
Okay, then you have a lot of limitations on a lot of things. That it just extended, the zoning change just extended that to ADUs generally, because it was, most of the time, all you can do is like the single family detached.
Right.
Sometimes you can do 2. But that, it was limited, in all of those instances, it's just ADUs are essentially, no ADU type is allowed.
In the special flood.
Then coastal risk
district.
Yeah.
Sorry, yeah. But in the special flood hazard area, which is different, I know, and not necessarily the same. If it's above the design flood elevation, it seems,
I think
good.
that's right. I will check again, just to make sure.
Again, I'm trying to remember. I just thought it was inclusive and no. And anyway. All right.
Even though our day job is just zoning all the time, some of it is forgetting it. Yeah.
My other question came back to me. In terms of adding an ADU to an existing building in a cellar or basement, what happens if the construction cost pushes you into the current code and you have to comply with new building requirements? Does that all of a sudden mean that you can't add the ADU into the existing building?
I would need to get back to you on that. That would be the right answer. Because, I mean, if you follow the train of thought, yes, but then also understand that this is a special city policy situation, so get back to you.
Hi. I have a question for ADUs in cellars and basements. Do they run afoul somehow of like the housing maintenance code requirements, like for rooms and cellars and basements? Or do we just ignore housing maintenance code? Because we do. I mean, it doesn't come up much, but.
So
For light hair
if you are I'm assuming you're not in the program area, you're not trying to legalize.
Just assuming a legal.
Right, so you're just, so you're a one family trying to add an ADU in the basement or cellar in an existing one family. So I believe we squared all of that away with Appendix U.
Okay.
Yeah.
So with regard to light and air out of windows that are like where the ceiling is only
Well,
2 feet above,
so-
and you're looking into a light well.
Well, so if you look at Appendix U, it still talks about, you need 6 square feet windows. The ceiling height is just so, the ceiling height where you cannot be more than, or less than 2 feet above adjacent grade, that's just to make sure you're not so far below grade that it makes it just horrible to try to create these windows, but there's still minimum window sizes. There's, if you read Appendix U202, it talks about, your window wells, what size they have to be and so on. So take a look, and then if you have further questions, feel free to email.
Got it. And then just one last thing, just so I understand. If you're building a new detached ADU in the rear yard and you meet all, it's all good, that's an NB filing? That'd be a new building application?
Yeah, so we're expecting these to get their own COs and their own bin. So we will be shushing our systems to make sure that happens. Yeah.
Thank you.
And so, yes, so we've been talking to the topo offices of different boroughs. We've we're briefing them and we're talking to them about like what kind of new street numbers should these get, and so we've gotten to one borough so far. We're doing all boroughs, so we're communicating that with them. But for the most part, they care about the street number plus some sort of A, for example, that kind of thing. Sorry? Yes, the street number. We're trying to get to all the borough topo offices.
Are ADUs limited by zoning district, street width, transit zone, in terms of zoning?
Sorry, can you repeat?
The places where ADUs are allowed, it seems to me that you had a brochure, the City of Yes, and it limited ADUs to certain zoning districts and to certain transit zones and certain street widths.
That wasn't the ADUs. That was, in the earlier presentation, that was the qualifying residential sites.
Yes.
Where you can do sort of bigger buildings and apartment buildings. That is limited to like areas near transit, wide streets, all that. The ancillary dwelling units don't have those limitations.
Okay, thank you.
But I just want to mention, like backyard ADUs, there are some zoning limitations. For example, like historic districts, you're not allowed to add a backyard ADU. There are actually quite a lot of community districts that have, during council drafting, have opted out of wanting these ADUs, so there are geographical restrictions based on zoning that you cannot. So, and backyard ADUs in zoning are actually brand new ADUs that you put in the rear, so it's yeah.
Hi, my question is regarding zoning. So the big change that has been made is going from 30 feet to 20 feet for in the rear yards. How are inner courtyards, up to now we've done 30 by 40. How are those affected? Do you do, 1,200 square feet with 20 feet on one side, or how does that work?
The minimum dimension was changed from 30 to 20 up to a height of 75 feet, measured from the bottom of the court, and the proportion was shrunk down to that as well. So it's not 1,200 for that portion. I think it's like 800 or something like that. Then above 75 feet, it reverts back to 30 and 1,200. Does that make
Thank
sense?
you.
Great. Thank you very much for coming. And thank you to the Department of Buildings.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you for having us, yes.